Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's selection comes at us from Nico. A bit of an unconventional love song, seemed fitting for a February submission. It's a shame we're getting to this in March, but I still like the intent behind it. The song is about Hunter's first intimate experience with Miss Leading, a sex worker at the dime, the establishment that his mother worked at. Hunter naively falls in love with her, as this is his first physical experience with a woman, but he does not yet understand her actual vocation and how this will affect their future relationship. Alright, interesting little story we have going here. We're looking at The Deer Hunter. This comes off of Act 2, which I think is the first time we've listened to something off of Act 2. I could be wrong on that. I'm looking forward to this, though. It's called The Bittersweet, Part 3, Embrace. I kind of like that, the phrase bittersweet, but also a suite of songs, with this being the third movement of it. It's probably going to be a bit downtrodden, as the context kind of leans towards. So yeah, that whole use of bittersweet I think works well. Let's dive into this though, see what's going on with the Deer Hunter today.
Darkness, hesitation, I fell into her.
We have the pedal tone over here, lead harmonic element over here. I guess it's more center.
This is amazing. Breathe out. This is amazing. She removed her clothes.
Dude.
And all of the world shines. Now that we're alone, all of the world shines.
Yeah, what a wild pattern there. It's an abrasive cymbal too. Everything about this is very off-putting.
First hot breath, then cold hands. Intrusion, but where? The fire inside was all light, and she blooms. And I never.
Yeah, so we're working in 6-bar phrases, which feels short, but it's so off-kilter rhythmically because of the drum part. Choir was a nice touch there.
your smile with winter skin.
I like the balls coming in under this too. It's a really great combination of very bright sounds, optimism in a lot of places, but being exceptionally off kilter. Something is wrong here.
We fall beneath the sea in the back of our hearts and fail to breathe until we resurface. We fall beneath the sea.
Yeah, so we've shifted to 3 here. And again, just like the intro, a simple pedal tone on a piano. Static, unmoving. I like the bass there. It's a bit of a hazier tone. I think it's a synth, actually. Yeah, I can't tell. It's too muffled. But it feels like drowning underwater. Really great job of making the guitars sound like police sirens. But again, there's also like a very underwater theme going on right here. So I feel this in a very slow 3. What's interesting, if you follow that very slow 3, it's in groups of 9 beats before we hit a repetition, which would be 3 bars. It's probably double time that. That is a very slow tempo to run that kind of section at. It's just the way I was feeling the main pulse. So if you double time it, you get 6 bars. Once again. 6. What is so important about 6 on this track? Because there it feels a little more natural, I think. Probably because we have the concepts of 3s within 3s. We have 3 beat bars, and 6 is a multiple of 3. and all of this just kind of it works, I think, a little better because of the ways that all the numbers are playing off of each other. But earlier in the song, I mean, the verse, that's 6 bars of 4/4. That is not great. It feels so awkward, and it's only further accentuated with the awkward rhythmic stuff going on with the drums. That entire opening verse, and subsequently, the second verse as well, is very off kilter. It is not easy to jam to. It's not easy to groove to. It feels awkward. It feels out of place. I mean, this could lean into quite a few things. I mean, it contrasts real heavy with the positivity that's coming through all of this. I mean, when you listen to the guitar chords, when you listen to the piano chords, when you listen to the vocal melody and the vocal delivery, it's very bright, very energetic, very positive. All of this, it's pointing towards something very sweet. While I wouldn't necessarily call the arrhythmic element of it, well, it's not arrhythmic. That's I think the definition of that is lacking rhythm. There is a rhythmic element to it. It's just obtuse. But when you bring that in, it's a contrast. It makes you wonder why we can have something so positive that feels so wrong. Not necessarily what I would call bitter sweet, but certainly it makes you question what's really going on here. There's something bubbling under the surface that doesn't match everything else. And I think that's just a wonderful way to build this out. I got to get into the lyrics. I'm going to assume that the lyrics don't really do much more than what the context was given to me already. I feel like that's a pretty solid overarching narrative for a single track that has what verse chorus, and that was it. I don't think the vocals came back after the that second chorus there. So there's not a lot of vocals, or I should say, I don't think there's a lot of lyrics on this one. So I can probably go with this idea that, he thinks he's found love in a sense in this person, but it's not exactly what I think he wants out of a relationship with someone, given their profession and his maybe even misunderstanding of what the relationship itself even is. This is probably all stuff that you can learn about elsewhere. From what I understand, misleading, who is misleading. I didn't catch that the first time I said it. Misleading. From what I recall, Misleading's a character that's been in The Deer Hunter for a while here, so maybe there's more to this story. I barely know anything about Hunter. I definitely don't know much about any of the supporting characters in this. Not to mention that this is, what, the middle of Act 2, probably? Track 7 of 15? Yeah, I mean, that's pretty spot on. So, I mean, we're quite a far into the story here. I'm probably not going to be able to pick up on all the little things, but I'm going to wager that that's exactly what this song is going for. To creating this feeling of joy and happiness with something just bubbling beneath the surface. That once you're on the outside, you see this as a red flag. You're like, yeah, dude, this isn't right. But when you're in that moment and you're surrounded by all this positivity, and it's like, yeah, I'm just gonna go with it. You miss all those red flags, and I think that's what the song is supposed to be. How the Hunter is just wrapped up in all this joy and positivity, completely missing out on the obtuse elements of the music, the parts of the environment and maybe subtle cues that some of the characters have given him that he's just not picking up on because he's so lost in the sauce here. Yeah, I think they did a pretty good job of that basic feeling there. There is another part of the song. It's the outro. We're going to touch on that later. But I do want to bring up a couple of really nice things that I like in this track. There is a majority of just atmospheric, harmonic things going on. Lots of chord progression stuff. I think the chord progression in here is beautiful. It captures a lot of that positive joy, that just feeling that you can do anything. It's a really great chord progression there. But sitting underneath that through a lot of this is just this pedal tone on this piano. To me, that feels like a lot. I mean, it could be interpreted a few ways. I kind of view it as a sort of a clock ticking throughout most of this track, just keeping that pulse there all the time. It doesn't really reflect on anything else musically. I don't think it adds much to the song musically, but it absolutely exists through all of this. Much like time, you don't always think about it. It doesn't really affect much of anything unless you're trying to like keep a schedule or something, but it's ever going. I'm curious if that's what Casey intended with it. If not, kind of curious what the intentions were for it. But I do find it to be this sort of unmoving, uncaring, apathetic part of the song where there is the disjointed rhythmic elements and there is the positive harmonic elements. There's just this thing that's existing in the song, sort of outside of everything, but connected to everything too. There's also so many different sounds that pop up here. Particularly, I want to put a little bit of focus on the chorus. Sorry, the choir. It is in the chorus, but the choir that comes up, I love this idea. I do find that the orchestration of this song is very light. I think Act 4 is where Casey begins to bring in some wider ornamentation, wider orchestration with more instrumentation going on in the songs. This still feels very much like a rock track with very little embellishment to it. Um, So having the choir here, I think, is a nice little choice. It brings some brightness. It brings these beautiful vocal stacks to the chorus. It helps really add to that sugary sweetness that the positive vibes are going for. And I think kind of overdoes it a little bit. And it puts us into the mind of Hunter, into somebody who is way over the top with this type of enthusiasm. Musically, we're starting to see some of that. But aside from the harmonic elements and the rhythmic elements and a couple of flourishy ideas, it's pretty straightforward in what it does. A lot of it is just building out this really positive vibe and sometimes putting some negative things under it, kind of bringing in a bit of darkness. This is stuff that I think actually works fine here. And in any other band, it wouldn't be a criticism. It's not really a criticism here either, but I just think it's an interesting thing to point out, given where Casey takes his musical composition skills in the future. When we look at Act 4, or probably 5, I don't think we've heard anything off of 5 yet, and definitely into his non-act stuff, such as when we checked out Anti-My not too long ago. We did a full album reaction to that, and just absolutely gorgeous composition from start to finish on that. It's night and day compared to what's going on right here. This is very simple, but still effective at what it's doing. I think it would be interesting. I'm not usually a fan of remaking things unless you're going to put some twists on it. And I think this is a case where I would love to hear him take his earlier Act 1, Act 2, maybe even Act 3, and put his modern styles on it. I think that would be very cool. Not to replace the originals in any way, but just to kind of see what he could do with his skills today with his writings from earlier. But I totally appreciate that he probably doesn't want to do that because I hate going back to my old stuff and listening to it. And while there are times I'm like, oh, I could probably update that. Here's definitely a melody that fits in there. Why didn't I think of that? But at the same time, like music, all art actually, it's like a time capsule of who the artist was at the time. Updating it feels wrong to me in some ways. So like as a fan, I would love to hear this written by modern Casey. But as a creator, I'm like, nah, leave this as it is. So like I'm 50-50 on that. I think it'd be cool to hear though. What are your thoughts on that? Would you like to hear Act 1 or Act 2 written with the modern the Deer Hunter composition style? I don't really have a good segue out of that. The end of the song. This is interesting because we dip down back to that piano pedal tone, one note over and over and over, and then we get a bassy instrument. It's very muffled. It's very compressed. I don't know what it is. I'm still kind of tossing back and forth whether it was a bass guitar or a synth, just really low with a bassy sort of uh, sound wave where we kind of. The thing is, it's very round. It sort of scoops into the note. There is a bit of punch here, and then it sort of resonates and dwindles out. It feels very much like finger picking an electric bass, but the way that it resonates, the way that it decays, and the way that the note shifts when we shift pitch going from one to the other, it feels very digital. And so I actually don't know what instrument it is. Anyways, we get some lovely melodic stuff on this instrument, but it's very quiet, very distant, hard to hear. I had mentioned that it sounds like drowning underwater, and then we move into a very watery vibe with the full band. What's interesting here is that we've stuck with a 3/4 time signature. 3/4 can be very waltzy. 3/4 shows up in quite a few different types of music, but it's also the quintessential time signature for uh, water based music. When you think of your favorite pirate songs, you think of the theme song maybe to Pirates of the Caribbean. It's in 3/4. So, yeah, wait. Oh no, that's in 4/4. Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, water music isn't exclusively in 3, but it is so frequently in 3 that you can probably type that into YouTube and find hundreds of video essays about it. It would not surprise me. It's such a common phenomenon. I don't even know where it stems from. I don't know where like the origin point was. Water music must be in 3/4. But I've this whole time I thought that song was in 3/4. Anyways, water music 3/4, this happens a lot. Most of this song has existed in 4. Granted, a strange 4. 6 bars of 4, but 4 nonetheless. Here we shift to something that feels watery. It feels like drowning. It's very muffled. It's very bass heavy. It isn't as bright as anything else. It feels like the kind of music you would have to showcase like a dream sequence where somebody's just falling out of like maybe the dream felt normal and then the floor fell away and now they're falling through like a black nothingness, a void, and then out of nowhere like the camera switches to like below water and then they break into the water and they're still falling down. Like this is the kind of music that encompasses that kind of vibe right there. It does such a great job of feeling lost and down and a little bit of sorrow thrown in there. This is definitely the bitter part of the bittersweet. I think it's interesting that we didn't match these two. We didn't try to create a bittersweet sound at the beginning. We had sweet, but something's off. And now we have bitter, we have negativity, we have sorrow here. This goes into the next track, I believe, and it feels like a transition. It's so distinct from the rest of the song, but it is bitter. It is that part of the title. Um, and I think it's interesting. Probably makes a lot of sense on the album. It doesn't really make a lot of sense here. Like I said, it feels transitionary. It probably helps move into the next track. I don't really have much else to say about it. It's just very well written, much like the first half of the song, or I guess the first 60%. It is definitely something that wears its emotions on its sleeve. It does exactly what it says it's going to do. You listen to the chords and you're like, oh, yeah, this is sad. When you listen to the chords at the beginning, you're like, oh, yeah, this is happy. Very much just exactly what it says it's going to do, it does. And I'm a big fan of that kind of straightforward writing, especially if you can put extra things on it, flourish and ornamentation, and spice it up in other areas of the composition. And that's one of the things I've always enjoyed about The Deer Hunter. Every song we've listened to, it's very easy to get a strong read on. It's very easy to get a full idea of what it's doing. The narrative writing and the music is typically very clear, but it isn't simple. It isn't boring. It's always keeping me on my toes, and there's always some cool things to listen for. So, yeah, I quite enjoyed this, which is pretty typical. I think the only time there was a Deer Hunter song I didn't like was the second song y'all gave me, which I think came off of Act 4, and I was just expecting more of their earlier post-hardcore stuff, and you threw me into their later, more indie rock with heavy orchestration stuff, And it was just a very different sound, and I wasn't expecting it. Nowadays, I'm like, yeah, yeah, give me anything from Deer Hunter. I kind of have a good understanding based on the album of what kind of music I'm getting, but I enjoy all of it. Yeah, I just wasn't in the right headspace for that. But as usual, I like everything y'all throw at me. So good stuff overall. Let's hit some lyrics. Sometimes I surprise myself. Other times it's a stark remembrance, a realization that some of the people whose music I listen to, they are just fantastic at telling a story musically. Yes, I think I do deserve a little pat on my back at times like this for picking up on these clues, but honestly, it's these composers who put this story, this information into the language of music. This song has lyrics about drowning in it, and it occurs towards the end of the track. I honestly did not expect to hear anything about this, given that I had a pretty strong idea of what the song was about, anyways. But here we go. Verse 1, darkness, hesitation. I fell into her arms. Breathe in, this is amazing. Breathe out, this is amazing. She removed her clothes and all the world shines. Now that we're alone, all of the world shines. First hot breath, then cold hands. Intrusion, but unaware. The fire inside was all light, and she bloomed, and I never knew life could be this good. The distant sighs, the clothes on the floor, the bedding a mess. She sings for more. So we have Hunter here, falling for this sex worker. Misleading, that's her name. And this is probably, I think it was described as his first relationship. What was that? The song's about Hunter's first intimate experience. Oh, with misleading. So maybe not their first intimate experience. I think that line can be read either way. I'm not gonna try to read into that. But he's falling for this woman, and she's probably, being a sex worker, she might not be totally upfront with Hunter. It might be one of those situations where his naivety is getting the best of him, but everything in his life right now is her. He says that the sun shines now. What I think is interesting here is there is an annotation here that says that there's a line from an earlier song that Hunter found that the sun disappeared the day that Miss Terry died. I don't know who Miss Terry is, but mystery. I kind of there's like a really campy element here of having characters named Mystery and Misleading, and it's so on the nose. But I mean even the idea that the main character's name is Hunter and he's a deer hunter, not one who hunts deer, but he is one who is dear to people. Um, it's just it's so campy that I find it very endearing. But I love camp to begin with, so that probably helps quite a bit. But I do think that this is interesting that in an earlier line he says that the sun disappeared, and now that he is found misleading, the world shines again. Just really great way of tying the narrative across albums together or across this album. They're all connected, anyways. And he says that life is good here while he's having physical relations with misleading. Now we get to the refrain, and it says, we fall beneath the sea in the back of our hearts and fail to breathe until we resurface again. I read this as just being completely overwhelmed and consumed by this new relationship. Not just the typical, like, puppy dog days of a relationship where everything is just really great and intoxicating, but also the fact that this might be his first relationship ever. That's just going to amplify these feelings that he has. This idea of plunging beneath the water and not caring at all. He says we fail to breathe until we resurface again. There's no panic, there's no fear in that. It is just a statement of fact here. This idea of plunging beneath the water is exactly what I was talking about in these final 3 minutes of the song. Final 2 minutes of the song, I think. It feels like drowning. And it's exactly what's going on here. He is falling completely for this person. Now, I wonder if the concept of drowning isn't just something that is picked specifically for this feeling of being overcome by love in this relationship, or if it's specifically done to create this feeling of negativity. Like I said, it feels sorrowful, even. To me, I read this as the bitter part of bittersweet. But maybe that wasn't intentional at all. I'm kind of curious if this was done for another reason, just to be like, oh, it's like drowning in love, right? And so we're just going to make some drowning music. Or if this was done specifically to create the opposition of the sweet part at the beginning of the song. To wrap this all up, there is one more annotation here going along with the idea of campy names. It seems that the place where misleading lives or possibly works is called the bitter sweet. Like a hotel room, a suite. So bittersweet actually works on 3 levels here. The word itself, the musical term of a suite, and the place where the events are taking place in. Getting a lot of mileage out of that one. Alright, these are my thoughts. The Deer Hunters, The Bittersweet Movement 3, Embrace. What do you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own interpretation of things or opinion about it. Put all of that and anything else you'd like to add into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today, but I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.